What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, Lone Wolf 902. In today's video, I have another titanium wood stove coming from my friends at Pomoly. So this current model in this bag is known as the timber stove. So I did go ahead and get out the T1 stove, which is sitting right here. Some of you may have seen the video on this. This is the T1 stove from Pomoly. Excellent stove. My current model has the front glass and two solid wall panels. So this one's got one window. The timber stove that we're going to be looking at has two windows, one glass on the side and one glass on the front. Now there are some major differences between the two stoves, and I'm going to go ahead and set this up and then we'll talk about the differences visually and then functionally, okay? Because there are a lot of differences between the T1 and the timber. So let's have a look at what is inside of the bag. All right, so when you purchase your timber stove, it will come in a nice bag, or at least mine came in this style of bag. Now, this is the bag that came with the T1. This is a nice cotton canvas bag, very roomy, nice and kind of loose canvas material. I really like that. This bag, it came in like, you guys can hear that? It's kind of a crinkly recycled paper like material. It almost reminds me of Tyvek, okay? And on the inside, it is padded. And the reason for that is the glass. This kind of protects the side glass. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I just wanted to mention that the bag is a different bag from the T1 style stove. So let's open up the bag. Here we have our pipe connector, which is identical to the pipe connector on the T1 stove. So these are compatible. They do work on both stoves. So if you have one stove and one happens to fail or whatever, you do have a second one. Now I haven't had any issues with these. These work excellent. You get the damper in there. Very nice, easy operation. Love that. So set that off to the side. It does come with a spark arrestor, or at least I have the spark arrestor. I believe you can purchase this as a combo. Get the spark arrestor with the stove. Mine came with the spark arrestor. It also came with a 10-foot section of pipe. I'm actually going to be cheating this evening, and I'm going to be using my 6-foot pipe that is for my T1 stove, because it's already formed, it's already ready to go. And the reason for that is I'm going to do a tutorial on how to roll your stovepipe for the very first time using pool noodles, and I'm going to be doing that with the 10-foot section. So that's why we're using the pre-burn section for tonight's video. So here is the spark arrestor. Really nice. This is excellent for securing the pipe so it doesn't blow around in the wind, and I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But it also stops rain from going down into your pipe, and it does break up quite a bit of sparks as well. So excellent piece of kit. Also have a different leg system, or a different assembly system on this stove. The legs are actually the same. So they do have the fold out legs like you see here on the T1. Except this is a fast fold stove, so there are hinges all the way on the side. The walls fold in and the front and back fold in, so fast fold design. This design goes together with 4 bolts, and it has little thumb screws up top and flush screws on the top. So this basically goes on the top of the stove, so there won't be any of these finger nuts protruding out for when you're cooking. It'll be nice and flat and smooth just like this. So that's a huge difference right there. So those are the assembly bolts that hold the top to the bottom. Speaking about the top, here is the top to the timber stove. Okay, now mine has been personalized with the Lone Wolf 902 logo. Loving that. And then we got the Pomoly logo on the bottom, laser etched in there. It's never gonna, it will discolor, but it won't come off. It's actually laser etched into the metal, much like their logo here. And the interesting thing with this etching is you can actually strike a match on it. I've tried it, it works. Pretty neat. So if you do need to strike a match on that, light your stove, you can. Now there are major differences with this top. As you can see, it's screwed together instead of having a U-shaped baffle, and that's part of their method on reducing weight for the stove, because the timber is 5 pounds. The T1, I want to say, is closer to 6.3. I'm not 100%. Check the specs on their website or go to my review video, because I believe I did talk about the weight on this. This stove is a little bit heavier. This stove is lighter, okay? So that's the top plate right there. Your pipe assembly goes there, hooks on. We'll show that in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. Now, I did mention this is a fast fold stove, okay? Show you guys if you're not familiar with this, okay? So So basically the top of the T1 comes off, and I might as well show this to you now. You can see that there are U-shaped baffles on top of the lid. Those are spot welded. That creates the lid, basically giving it a lot of structure so it doesn't warp, it doesn't twist, it doesn't bend. With the timber stove, you can see they didn't go with the baffle because it's extra weight, it's added titanium weight. Instead, they did a little vertical fin system and went ahead and bolted it together. So you can see the major difference there. I could tell right now just by holding this, even with that pipe adapter on there, this is significantly heavier than this, okay? Now, this is, I believe, 0.6 millimeter thick of titanium, and this is 1 millimeter thick of titanium. So that is another major difference between the two stoves. So that's a good look at the top. Talk about the fast fold system. I just want to get this out of the way because this assembles completely different. So when I say fast fold, what I'm talking about, undo this tab here. These sides fold in. That's your stove packed away right there. You just got to fold the legs in underneath. Of course, take off your chimney section here that's on there. You got to take that off. And it basically packs into the bag just like that, okay? Right inside of this bag. So that's the fast fold system. This stove, we're gonna go through the assembly together because it is completely different. It packs a lot flatter, okay? So pulling out the rest of the stove, you can see right there, that packs incredibly flat. Even with the top on there, it's still a lower profile than the T1 stove. Now there's a benefit to doing this, and I'll get some of the stuff cleaned up, and then we'll talk about some of the benefits of the flat pack and then the disassembled pack. All right, so we've got the T1 assembled again, so you can kind of see what's going on here. Get that situated there. Now, talking about this stove, if you're packing two people, if you're doing a duo camp and you and your friend or you and a partner or whoever are going camping, you can't separate the weight of this. I mean, one person can carry the pipe, the other person can carry just the top and the stove connector. That's it. So if you want to split the weight, that's kind of the only components you can split. So there's still quite a large bit of bulk to go with that stove that someone has to take. Now, sure, you can separate other gear. You know, some person can carry a little bit more food than the other or whatever. This stove comes completely apart. So here we've got the window panel, and you can get just your stove with just a solid panel, or you can get the side glass version. My version, as I mentioned earlier, does have the front glass and the side glass. Here's a look at the side plate with no window. Very nice. And then we've got the front door right here. Same door design as on the T1. Very nice. And then we've got the rear panel, okay? And then we've got the bottom, of course, with the fold-out legs, much the same way as the T1 operates. So you can see that this stove comes completely apart into tiny pieces. So if you did go out in a little bit larger group, maybe you get 3 people or whatever, you give 2 pieces to one person, 2 major pieces to the other. I would keep the glass together with the main body piece. That way it protects it from getting warped and broken. And you kind of get where I'm going with this. So you can separate this into really small pieces. Now, if down the road you happen to have an issue, let's say, I haven't had an issue with the glass. Obviously, I haven't burned in this stove yet, but I haven't had any issue with the glass on any of my other stoves. But let's say you accidentally did drop this and broke it. This glass is tempered, okay? If you did break this, you could always go to Pomoly and say, hey, I need another glass replacement. And you can get just the glass. There's screws there. You can go ahead and pop that out and replace the glass. Now, if you didn't want the glass, you could replace it with a solid plate, okay? So you can run the stove with the window, and then your next trip, if you don't want the window, you can bring 2 solid panels, run it with just the solid panel instead of having the glass. Benefit to that is this glass does weigh a lot, okay? The whole stove is 5 pounds. This right here, that glass, that's got to be close to 1 pound. It is heavy glass, it is tempered, it is very, very strong, but it is heavy. So it is a little bit of a luxury to have the side view if that's what you're into. I like it because I'm going to be using this in a very large tent, and this will throw a lot of light to help illuminate the inside of the tent. So now that we've looked at the components, let's get the stove together. So basically, how I like to do this is lay the stove bottom down and take your side panel. And this is kind of neat because you could choose to have the window on the left side or the right side. Whereas my other Pomoly stove, this is the T1, I also have the, I'm going to call it the T0. I have a side window on that stove as well, and I believe it's on the back side. So I have to position my stove accordingly to have a view of that window. This window I can move from side to side. So that's kind of neat. So let's go through the setup process and then let's give it a quick wipe down, clean, and let's get it burning. All right, so for this setup, I'm going to put the glass side, the window here, on the left side of the stove, and it just drops into the bottom receiver slots just like that. Drops in, no tools, nothing, slides right in there, nice and easy. Now we take the rear panel, and it's got these two fins. Those lock into a fin that basically accepts that on both side panels. So what I like to do is get the other side panel, drop that in, get that situated, and then take these channels, these little fins here, line them up in that channel and push it down with nice even pressure. Very simple setup. It does take a few minutes to get set up. It's not a fast fold stove, but it doesn't take long. It's very quick once you get the hang of it. So we got our front door here. Make sure we got it positioned so the door opens properly. Do the same thing, line up the fin and basically slide it down in the channel. Very simple setup. Slide that all the way down. Make sure you got even pressure so you're not tweaking it to one side or the other. That's set in there just like that. Give you guys a side look at that so you can see everything's locked in. Now we take the top portion, we got our lid. On the other side of this, it has the same grooves to lock in. So you basically just drop it in once you get all of them lined up. Simple, just like that. So there's our assembled stove. Now we have to put the screws through. This is the part that may take some people a little bit of time because you have to line them up, okay? So here on the screw, we've got this large knurled finger nut down here. Take that off. And then up here, we've got a flat washer. Pass that through. I like opening the door and lining it up. Slide it down through. It is a little finicky, but once you get it dropped through, you take your finger nut and basically just tighten it up. Really, really simple. Just like that, finger tight. That's one done. I want to go ahead and do the other three, and then we'll get the stove attachment, the pipe attachment piece on, and we'll get some wood in there. Okay, really quick before I forget, because I just did forget. Size. Let's look at specs for length and height and width and all that good stuff, because I want to do that before I start burning. So, measuring tape. Let's talk about the length of the stove. We are coming in at 15 inches long. The T1 stove is 15 1/4. Let's talk about the width. We've got 7 7/8. The T1 stove, we have a width of 8 3/4. Okay, so this is a little bit wider. Talk about height. For height, we're looking 7 3/4. For height on the T1, we are 7 1/8. Okay, so there are some differences in specs, and you could probably see right off the bat there, once we line them up head to head. This is the T1, this is the timber. So there are a little bit of differences. The front window is narrower, this one's wider. They've both got the same sliding vent, the same door operation. Very, very, very similar in a lot of these aspects, but they're very different in their own aspects. So let's get the stove cleaned off, and I should probably talk about that first. When you guys get anything titanium that you're going to basically put over heat, the oils that are on your fingerprints, okay, or on your hands, your fingerprints, what happens is this stove is incredibly dirty right now. I've been touching it. I've got a lot of oil on it. So all of these fingerprints, that's not the side I want. So all these fingerprints on this side of the stove, they're all going to burn in permanently. So you're going to have a whole bunch of blotches all over the stove. To prevent that, I recommend putting on some rubber gloves and rubbing alcohol or methyl hydrate or some kind of cleaner to clean the oil off, non-chemical based. Give it a wipe down and clean all the fingerprints off. So that's what I'm going to do right now, and I'm also going to get the chimney attached, get some wood in it, light it up because I'm losing light very quickly this evening. So I'm gonna clean the stove and get the chimney on, and I'll bring you guys right back once we get the fire going. All right, guys, we got the fire lit. Open up that damper in the rear, open up our front vent, get the door shut. Chimney pipe is up there, everything's secure. Looking pretty good. So first burn in the new timber stove. Right on. So right now is probably a good opportunity to say thank you to the guys over at Pomoly for making this possible, because I mean, I've got all kinds of gear from Pomoly and they are excellent guys. Excellent. Really good friends too. So if you guys are chatting with Pomoly, tell them that I said thank you very much, and give them a thank you too for sending this stuff to us here at Lone Wolf 902 so we can show it to you guys out on the market, because this is really awesome, especially not just to have the one stove, but to have another stove and another stove to compare them with. So you get a good look at this model versus that model and kind of see what you think and what you like about the different models. Now we are getting a little bit of puffing. This is very typical, and I mentioned this in the last video review that I did of this stove. When you're lighting your stove, because right now I do have a cool breeze coming directly behind the camera, and what's happening is it's going directly in these jets and it's pushing the smoke out of the stove. Okay, there's a little bit of wisping right here, and this is at its most fragile state is when you first light it. After it gets burning more constant, it just goes right up and out the chimney. Now if this was inside of a tent, it would not do that. I know that because this stove did the same thing to me, and the stove before that did the same thing as well. That's hot. So right away, the top of the stove is already starting to discolor and turn that nice titanium blue and purple, which is very quick. This has only been going for about 10 minutes. Let's get the door shut. If you haven't noticed yet, I do not have the spark arrestor on the top of the pipe, mainly because I can't reach it. I stood on top of the picnic table, I can't get it on there. We'll burn this next time we get the stove out. It's a very nice spark arrestor. It does fit on the pipe very securely, and you can actually connect carabiners to it and guy it out. So if you have a longer pipe like this stove, I do have a 10 foot pipe to get out the longer tents, the taller teepees. It does have tabs on the side of the spark arrestor, so you can hook on a carabiner and guy it out to keep that pipe still from blowing around in the wind. So to show it a little bit closer what I'm talking about here, the spark arrestor has 3 fins in there, and basically that'll sit on top of the pipe. I use a guy line with a little carabiner, and what I do is there are these 3 fins with little holes drilled in them. And you can hook onto the little honeycomb if you want to, but I just go right to the little hole, click on there, lock my carabiner in, and then you guy this out to the ground. Okay, so I got about 10 to 20 feet of cordage here. Guy that out away from the tent. So this is really nice for those really tall teepees, or if you just want a really long pipe to make sure no sparks that do make it through this happen to come down on top of your tent, because sometimes it happens. So this will be an excellent way to secure that tall pipe in high wind, so it's not going to be rocking back and forth. And I'm going to talk about this more in a future video that I've got coming up. I'm just waiting on a few more pieces of gear to arrive in the mail, and then we'll be doing a more in-depth look at a lot of hot tenting things. That thing is roasting right now, man. Whew, not a lot of heat leakage on the bottom. I should mention, I did have a viewer comment on the placement of the stove when I do my reviews on top of my wooden picnic table. He was a little concerned that it was going to burn my wooden picnic table. That's not the case. My hands here, it's nice and toasty and warm. It does not burn my picnic table, and if it does, I don't really care. So thank you for your concern, but it's totally fine. And that is a good thing to talk about, actually. There's not a ton of heat leakage, okay? It is very warm, I will say that, but it's not hot enough to burn. So that should give you another idea of how much snow or ice melt you're gonna have underneath of your stove. I like to prop logs lengthwise and then get the stove situated on top if I'm on top of ice or snow. Most of the time I just shovel out the ground, place it down, done, no issues. with this stove, it works very, very well. Okay, so spark arrestor, like I said, we'll be talking about that in a later video, but right now this thing is cranking. Man, that is going really good, and that side window is excellent. Love that. So far so good. All right, so been going for quite a while now, burning very, very clean. It's starting to burn a lot cleaner. The wood that I'm using is dried wood. It's just household wood that I had kicking around, nice kiln dried wood. Let's talk about the side window for just a second, because I did load a bunch of birch bark inside of here, okay? I don't recommend using birch bark in stoves that have glass windows, because they let off a lot of tar and a lot of oils and a lot of nasty stuff. Now, this will self-clean itself, okay? If you shut the door and you get it burning very, very hot, and you kind of dampen down this little vent here, and you keep the heat locked inside of the stove, that will actually self-clean itself. It's amazing. It'll burn, it'll start very, very small, and then it'll enlarge to a crystal clear glass window. It's awesome. I didn't think it would, but when I was out with my other titanium stove, it cleaned off within about half hour. So that is blackened, and you'll notice I just damped that down. The black is building. Once you get this burning very, very cleanly, and that ring is very hot right now, use a piece of firewood, open that up again, get some more flame. So once you do get this burning very, very clean, and you got a nice coal base, which I don't quite have a coal base in there right now, but once you get a very, very nice coal base in there, it will start to self-clean itself. Now, maintenance of the stove. These titanium stoves, they clean, or they cool off very, very quickly, okay? So you can put the fire out within about 10 to 15 minutes. It's cool enough to pick up, disassemble, take it outside, whatever you gotta do. This stove is incredibly easy to clean, because all you gotta do is pop the top off and take that whole panel, and I bring a little green scrub pad, and you just water it with warm water and just go in little circles, scrub it off. It comes off very, very, very easily. I do it with the T1 stove here with the front glass. If I'm burning really damp wood, it'll start to spit a lot of black smoke. I do it with the T0 stove, the very first titanium stove they sent me. It has a side window, and I just take the top off. I reach in with the green scrubby, I wash it off, it comes off, no issue. So if you are concerned about the blackness, if you don't need the window, don't get the window, get the model without the window. But if you do like having the window, it does clean itself when you get it burning really, really nice and clean. So don't panic on that. Just let it go through the cycle. This is the very first burn for me in the stove. So go through the proper cycles, do the burning, use your nice dry, clean wood, and you'll have a little bit of a better experience with that. All right, guys, so I've been sitting out here for quite a while. I've got the wood stove burning really, really hot right now. It's past dark now, so I do have my flashlight lighting up the scene. I'm gonna let you guys go for this video, but I'm gonna finish burning in the stove, get the nice blues and purples all over the stove, and pack it away for the night. So hopefully this video was helpful to you guys. And if you haven't checked out the review video on the T1 stove, please do that. I'll probably drop it at the end of this video. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got for you. And as I said earlier, I will be doing a more in-depth video on hot tents and hot tent stoves very soon. So stay tuned for that. And like I said, I'm just going to continue burning this and get it packed away. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.